Hey, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining into this LinkedIn Live on unlocking Viva value, services, migrations, and strategic shifts in 2025. In a few minutes, we'll be talking about if you're an enterprise, how you can derive more value from your Viva assessments. If you're a Viva partner, what can you do to improve your chances of winning, and what can you do to support your enterprises? But we'll give everyone a minute and a half to join before we kick off the LinkedIn Live. In the meantime, I have a interesting question for the fellow panelists and also for the audience, right? So for the audience, please enter your responses in the chat while I ask the question to my panelists. So the question is, if Viva was a car, what car would it be and why? So each of you gets 20 seconds. So Rohit, I'll start with you.
Thanks for putting me on spot. Uh, so I would say, it would be Honda City for me. Not sure if, the global audience knows the context, but so my defense to it is it's a very comfortable, laid back car for people who don't like a lot of change, who will not go off-roading, who will not take it buzzing through the hills, but they want it to do the bare minimum, take them around the town, do the shopping, and be back safely. So I think for me it would be Honda City.
Okay, Animesh, what about you?
Yeah, I think my point of view is very different from Rohit. So it is Lexus RX, precision engineered and built specifically for the environment, insert life sciences. So it may not be the flashiest, but I think it delivers enterprise grade performance. So Lexus RX for me.
Durga.
Well, I don't know. Well, I think my answer is going to be completely different. But when I think of a car, it's always Yellow Beetle for me. I'm not sure if that's going to be Viva or not. Well, I will leave that to the imagination of the audience. But I think it's legacy. It's in style always.
Close enough, right? There aren't a lot of orange cars, so I guess yellow is the closest you can get.
Ah.
Uh, my answer would have been Tesla or BYD because like I think Viva has changed the way in which the life sciences industry operates, much like how Tesla and BYD have changed the type of cars people drive. So yeah, good. I think yeah, we're about 2 to 3 minutes in, so welcome everyone for joining in. So yes, you have joined the right LinkedIn Live. So the title of today's discussion is Unlocking Viva Values, Services, Migrations, and Strategic Shifts in 2025. And as the name suggests, right, we'll talk about if you're an enterprise, how you can get more value from Viva. If you are a Viva partner, what can you do, or what are some of your competitors doing that is helping enterprises drive more value? Uh, and again, the reason for focusing on Viva is I think they've been a good force in life sciences. They've grown tremendously over the last few years. They have changed the way in which life sciences companies, particularly pharma companies, use tech. So we are going to talk a little bit more about how, as an enterprise, you can get more value. And a lot of the insights that we'll share today are from some of the existing research that we are doing, as well as some of the interesting upcoming research pieces. And one of those research pieces is the Viva Services Peak Metrics Assessment. Animesh, you are leading that assessment. Can you share with the audience a little bit more about what the assessment is?
Sure, Chunky. So this year's Viva Services Peak Matrix Assessment is much more extensive than the last iteration we did back in 2021. We are evaluating about 35 providers, which includes a mix of boutique specialists who only focus on Viva, as well as global system integration that do end-to-end delivery. So the report will most likely go live later this month. But Chunky, what's exciting is that the trends that we will touch upon today, to name a few, platformization, automation, hybrid sourcing, they are already shaping the landscape.
That sort of
Fantastic.
reminds me, I think the first time we did this, it only had 15 players back in 2021. And now I know Animesh had a very strict criteria, and the list was finally finalized to 35. And that's only who made the cut, right? That's almost like 2.3x than the first list. So it's definitely sprawling with a lot of players.
Yeah, more than 100% growth, right? So more growth than Viva. Okay. So, anyways, thanks for that overview. And as you mentioned, right, a lot of what we're going to talk about today is our like insights that we've gathered in part through the peak metrics assessment. And I think one of the biggest shifts that we've seen is how enterprises are going from module-based implementation to more platform-based implementation. Rohit, can you share a little bit more about what you are seeing in this regard?
Yeah, so this shift, right? So I've been closely involved with animation, hearing stories from service providers, speaking to enterprises, and you mentioned about this shift. It's very real, and honestly, it's long overdue. I remember from years we are talking about that, different silos, they need to speak to each other, and Viva, again, defending my point of why I thought it always used to be, Honda City for me. It used to be like your favorite buffet, right? Your comfort buffet. You picked what you liked, a little bit of rim here, a scoop of say promo mats there. But now clients, they want the whole tasting menu served in sync. So clients are now, they're waking up and they're asking, hey, why not roll out Vault quality, safety, and rim together? Why can't we do this with connected workflows, shared data, and one reporting universe? So maybe in the earlier world, right? So it was how modules, they were even launched by Viva, but now everything is there. They want everything served together. So what we are seeing in terms of shift chunky is, shift from Vault projects to, I would say, Viva programs. And it is at a platform level thinking that conversation is happening. And this has downstream or some real implications. So I'll touch upon a few, and Animesh, feel free to chime in if you think otherwise from your Hilux example. So first, I think delivery is getting a lot more interesting, and we are analysts, we can say it interesting, but on ground, interesting means complicated. Now, say a change control in quality could trigger a labeling update in RIM, which could eventually kick off a safety review. So if these vaults, they're not talking to each other, welcome to the silo city again, which is literally the thing that Animesh's Hilux Viva is designed to avoid. Second, I think for service providers, the delivery model is evolving fast. Like I mentioned, clients, they don't want three different teams playing telephone across walls. So they want one team, a cross-functional crew which has, say, architecture lead, validation nerd, regulatory SMEs, and maybe a captain who can take a penalty under pressure. Right. So like jokes apart. And I think the last most important thing is around validation. When you're running multiple volts in sync, traceability is a nightmare. We are talking, say, cross volt testing frameworks, shared documentation, and validation accelerators that just don't say pass or fail, but they should be able to tell you why 5 volts down the line might crash if you change one code in the configuration. And I think finally governance say, see, this is not a 3-month go live anymore. These are platform programs, multi-release, multi-function, and sometimes multi-year. You need PMOs who understand both process, they understand platform, they understand technology. So people who can say wrestle advisory, IT, change management, and still know what a UAT defect means. So I think this is how I see landscape changing. And I would like this Honda City to become a BYD or a Hilux real soon.
Thanks, Rohit. And I think one of the things that you touched upon, and again, this is also something that we've talked about in our research before, right? You talked about how organizations are moving from single modules to more platform-based implementations or end-to-end implementations. And I think R&D is one area where we're seeing that a lot. So you gave the example of RIM, safety, and quality together. And I think that's the exact trend that I think goes back to maybe 2019 or 2020 when we started talking about this. That how organizations will move from 100 different applications they have across clinical, safety, regulatory, quality, to an end-to-end platform. And uh, since then, I think we've seen some sourcing initiatives as well. Some of them, I think, are more public than others. And I think in a lot of cases, those organizations who had more end-to-end platform vision for that R&D, a lot of them have gone with Viva because of the capabilities that they're able to bring in across these functions like clinical, regulatory, safety, and quality.
And just on that note, right, it just got me thinking in terms of while you talk about an end-to-end platform, everyone might start thinking this is too futuristic, right? Maybe at least a year ago when we used to have these conversations, nudging the industry around how what's the benefits of a true end-to-end platform, which we've started seeing in, say, clinical, commercial, R&D, and now I think they are talking about it at an enterprise-wide level. And again, some pessimists might say that this is too futuristic, but I can probably say with good conviction that with all the changes that we are seeing in the supply landscape, and especially the leading players' vision and strategy that they've articulated for themselves, this seemed to happen a lot more sooner than we might have anticipated earlier.
Yeah, and a lot of them are public, right? So Boehringer Ingelheim is one example. They're one medicine platform, and there are multiple others as well, right? So I think when we started talking about this in 2019 and 2020, it was more that, hey, this is the direction in which we think organizations will move. And then I think 2021 is where we started to see some of the sourcing initiatives happen, right? So and again, like, as an industry, it's, I would say, it's still restricted to a few number of enterprises uh, in terms of how some of the organizations are thinking about their end-to-end platform. But still, I think for the vast majority, I think this is still something that I think they aspire to. So we talked about platformatization, right? So that's clearly one major theme that is coming out of this assessment. Animesh, I'll come back to you, right? So other than this particular theme of platformatization, what are some of the other major changes that you have seen in the current iteration of the assessment when you compare it to the one that we did in 2021?
Absolutely, Chunky. So, building on what Rohit just shared, the most visible shift in provider strategy this year has been pivoting away from traditional delivery model to value-linked services. Let me unpack that a bit. So, earlier the conversation was very execution focused. Provider would talk about how many consultants they have and how many Vault implementation they had done so far. Now that is becoming the basic hygiene, and what's resonating with clients is what business outcome can you deliver once they go live. For example, we are seeing outcome-based application management services contracts that say something along the line of don't just keep lights on the Vault platform, but also commit to, say, reducing change request backlog by X% or improving submission cycle time by Y%. So that is a big departure from the traditional time and material support approach that a lot of providers used to take, and it's changing how providers pitch. So there is more focus on continuous improvement, even incentive-based pricing in some cases.
And I imagine this puts a lot of pressure on partners, both from a depth as well as a breadth perspective. Is that something that you're seeing as well?
Spot on, Chunky. I think the second big shift is with the cross-cloud maturity, which Rohit also touched upon. So it used to be fine to say we are a promo mat shop or we specialized in regulatory, but clients now want fewer handoffs and more life cycle alignment. So the more successful providers are building credibility across the value chain, like Rohit mentioned, linking safety with labeling, regulatory with quality management, and CRM with content ops. And to support that, large SIs are investing in dedicated Vault Center of Excellence, which sometimes even have product-specific teams within their broader Viva unit. And meanwhile, if we talk about mid-tier players, they are stretching outward. For instance, a CRM-focused provider might add Vault safety, a regulatory player might add commercial capability. So the message they are trying to put out in the market is that, hey, we understand Viva as a platform and not just disconnected modules. And third and lastly, arguably the most telling is shifting role of accelerator. So earlier tools were buried just inside the slide decks. now they are front and center, whether it's a GenAI testing bot, auto migration utility. So in a way, it's a maturity curve. The providers aren't just executing, they are anticipating as well. So that is becoming the new currency of credibility.
Thanks for that, Animesh. And I think while we continue this conversation, just one thing that I wanted to share with our audience is if you have any questions or if you have any comments, add them in the comments option. We will be taking a few questions as well, right? So share your questions, share your opinions. We would love to hear from you as well. So, Animesh, you started to touch upon what some of the service partners are doing, right? And I think uh, from from a service partner perspective, Veeva is obviously an important partner, right? Because of the breadth of Veeva's capabilities, their penetration in life sciences companies, and it's a huge services market as well. And then we've seen how this market has evolved. So I think Durga, you mentioned we've gone from 15, 16 players to 35 players in this iteration, right? So clearly there's a lot of interest. Uh, what I now want to talk about is given that again this market, the services market has also expanded significantly. We have more and more service partners compared to what we had before. That obviously creates more competition, right? So, Durga, what do you think are the characteristics of the ones which are winning more? So we know that certifications is obviously one, but that's only a part of it and not the entire thing, right? So what are some of the things which are leading to some of the service partners winning? And we see a lot of clients renewing with the same partners year over year, right? So what are some of the contributing factors to that?
So I think, Chunky, on that, I'll take your cue on the certifications and start there. Earlier, probably, back in 2021, when there were only a handful of service partners, certifications was an easy way to differentiate. It was just enough for someone to showcase that they have the capability to deliver enterprise-wide Veeva platform implementation, right? But I think with the number of service partners also increasing and the complexity of ask also increasing because the product platform landscape is also changing at a fast pace. At least there are three things that popped out in our recent conversations with nearly 30 plus life sciences enterprises, and the the win themes were rather very simple, if I may, right? The first one was pharma is just expecting continuity in the talent pool that is being onboarded, right? Now, especially for long standing engagements, what they have mentioned is initially I get like the best talent pool, but there have been instances, especially when the project finds its wheels, there's swap of resources, right? And that is something that's not being appreciated. So if the service partner is ensuring the SME and talent pool continuity throughout the different phases, right, from planning to execution to maintenance, that's what is truly standing out for the enterprise clients. Now, the second one is also from an execution standpoint, but it is more around how are they dealing the situations, especially in a pressure scenario, right? So let's say enterprises have a compliance risk that got flagged, or they have a go live activity planned like in the coming weeks. How agile are the service partners in terms of addressing these new or fast-paced asks of pharma enterprises, and their flexibility to do that within or outside the service engagement that they have? That is again something that's truly standing out. And the last one is more from a strategy standpoint, and I think I lean on to what Animesh was also talking about, where the focus is also more from an outcome standpoint, right? So farmers are not really looking for mere order takers in a way, especially given the pace at which this entire technology landscape is changing. The expectation is that service partners understand these trends in the market, digest that, and bring the implications of those to the pharma so that they are able to figure out what kind of changes do I need to implement now, right? So that I'm ahead of the curve. So now I think while these are very simple, I know it's a lot more complex. I'm sure service partners must be wondering that this is not that simple as it sounds. We do understand that, but this is what really is helping one not just renew but also expand their deal engagements. But that actually brings a question in my head, because I know, Animesh, you talked about in this new assessment we've seen different categories of players, and that probably is more prominent than what we observed the last time around, right? So can you probably also help us understand what's differentiating maybe a true Viva service specialist versus a global system integrator?
Right. So that is such a critical question, Durga, especially now that we see how the both sides are evolving. I would say the decision often comes down to three factors. So scope, complexity, compliance risk, and internal maturity. So when the work is, say, high compliance and tightly scoped, for instance, Vault Safety Build or a CRM rebuild, boutique specialists tend to shine. They are nimble, they go deep, and they often bring ex-pharma SMEs who have handled audit or firsthand they have built safety system themselves. So we have even seen clients pick boutique over SIs precisely because they wanted the A team, like you mentioned, from day one, and not a filter down delivery pool. Now flip the scenario. Think multi-country rollouts, integrated Viva plus Salesforce plus SAP landscape, or an enterprise-wide AMS consolidation. That is where SIs bring muscle, program management scale, infrastructure skills, cross-platform delivery, and even frankly, geographical coverage, which tend to be much larger.
So while you've talked about what specialists sort of differentiate on and where GSIs shine, what I also want to understand is, are you seeing how are the deal engagements playing out, right? Is it maybe are farmers preferring to pick, say, one partner for everything, or are you seeing also a hybrid service partner approach?
Right. So the hybrid model is definitely picking up the traction. We have seen client use a boutique for MVP design or validation, and then they bring in the SI to scale the rollout. In other cases, they start with, say, large providers and then maybe layer in niche provider for specific accelerators or domain depth. So this is the dual sourcing strategy, which is also informing governance. Clients are now writing into contracts that, hey, here's who on which vault, here's how the change requests are routed, and here how the IP flows across the vendor. So it's not just about vendor selection, it's also about ecosystem designing. So to summarize, boutique win on agility, SIs win on scale, but increasingly clients are now starting to ask who's best aligned for this particular use case right now. So it is becoming more of a maturity fit decision and not just a size based one.
Right.
So maybe I'll add a pointer there to what Animesh mentioned. So Durga, interesting point there, right? So I think this is something similar and also something different as we see with specialists across other service areas, right? So what we observed was the specialist, say someone specializes only in, say, development cloud implementations, and they take pride in that, right? So they're like, we are specialists here, we bring in talent here, and we don't want to get into commercial cloud. So which is sometimes appalling that hey, why don't you want to go to the other 50% of the market, but they don't want to dilute their value prop. So I think that was really interesting finding for me that how we typically go after some of the providers, taking our point of view. But I think this was interesting learning for me, I would say, that if the specialists, they are taking pride in we are development cloud specialists, this is what we focus on, this is what we are known in the market for. And on the flip side, you will find similar examples for commercial cloud as well. They're like, we are specialists to commercial area. We don't want to do the development cloud work. So that's how the landscape is for specialists, I would say.
It sounds like a specialist within a specialist, almost like a dream within a dream, if you know what I'm saying.
So we have a few questions. So let's take some of those questions. Right? So there's a question by Anand. What is the addressable market for migrations based on the recent shift that has taken place? So maybe I can take it up and then others feel free to chime in. Right. So one is, I think the revised numbers are not official yet. I think they will be official when we publish the peak metrics assessment towards the end of this month. So I think at that point we'll be able to share the exact numbers. But it's easily over more than $1 billion in terms of the overall market size. Some of the Veeva partners, I think the largest partner is easily more than 200 million is what they get from Veeva services. Again, few more in the 100 million range. Viva's professional services arm themselves, I think they're about 400 to 450 million, right? So again, if you add all of that up, easily more than $1 billion. Rohit, Durga, Animesh, anything I've missed?
No, sounds about. I mean, I think well, while that's the TAM, what I would want to say is I think the migration market is not super active right now, as many of you would know. It's still a lot more focus on figuring out what's the roadmap going to look like, what's my platform, not just within CRMs, right? I think across the entire landscape of life sciences platforms, right, from the development and the commercial cloud, what's my platform strategy going to look like? So while migration is the bigger piece of the puzzle, and but right now a lot of the growth is still boiling down to the consulting and strategy piece.
Good
Maybe
points.
a quick cherry on top is, how we have seen the consulting and custom app development part of the entire Viva services suite move from maybe close to, 15-20% in 2021 to close to 30% now, or maybe Animesh can correct. I know it's near 30-35%. So we've seen this part of the overall pie as the overall pie also expands, but percentage of what consulting and custom app development used to be 4 years back, it is a lot more now.
That is Rohit for you sharing some spoilers. Okay, so I think let's take another question. So the question is from Rohin. With Viva doing the migration, what is the role of service integrator for end-to-end platform implementations? Is it just limited to program management and advisory? Anyone wants to take this up?
Well, I think I alluded to it a bit, so maybe I'll start on that. I wouldn't say the role is just limited to program management and advisory. Right, again, as you all know, these are the first few implementations that are happening. So naturally, the professional services arm of Viva is more intertwined in these engagements, but as a lot of these decisions play out and as the first few migrations happen, that's when the role of the service partners is expected to increase multifold. But again, that doesn't necessarily mean it will just be limited to program management and advisory.
Okay, fantastic. Thanks, Durga.
Maybe address, I think, what the question starts with. I think it's Rohin asked with Viva doing migration. So Rohin, you are correct there that Viva is doing some of the initial migrations, but they in the long run will not do all the migrations. So the old boring SI work is still in place, and again, spoilers, that is the biggest piece of the pie.
And I think for those who are tuning into this LinkedIn live, right? If if you want to know more, you can also download a complimentary snapshot of the peak metrics assessment when it gets live. I think there was one other question on Gen AI, but maybe we can address that in the next section, right? Because that is the direction in which we were going as well. So, but I think just to set some context around what I am seeing, right? So, in the recent assessment, we saw a lot of providers offering validation bots, auto tagging engines, Gen AI powered CRM assistants. And I think even clients are getting sharper now in how they're asking the question. So they're asking their providers what's scaling, what's compliant, and what's even real. And with Viva also stepping in to validate some of the Gen AI plugins, I think this makes it even more interesting, right? So let's look at that in a little bit more detail. And Rohit, I'll come to you first. Given that there's been a lot of buzz around Gen AI, what are you actually seeing land and delivery contracts?
So always have my tongue in cheek, when Gen AI or agentic AI comes up in conversations, well, chunky, like you mentioned, buzz. So I would say buzz is deafening. sometimes in a good way, most of the times not in a good way. And I think we've all felt it, right? So every other conversation, even for us analysts, or I would believe for providers as well, the question is, hey, what are you doing in Gen AI, or what are you doing in agentic AI? And honestly, for the longest time, the answer was, well, we've got a pilot and there's a slide in the deck with a lightning bolt on it. But what's happening, I would not say, it's a revolution right now, especially for the platform services bit. It's more like a cautious dipstick stepping into actual delivery. Take CRM, for example. Some providers, they have started to roll out AI assisted call planning, for example, as a use case, suggesting which message to lead, which message will land with what kind of HCP, all of that. And there's another parallel to it of AI supported coaching, basically software assisting or flagging moments where reps might have wandered off script. So it helps, it's useful, but I would not call it revolutionary or radical as yet, because again, these are some of the initial ideas, initial use cases which are now seeing the light of production level adoption. But we don't have to forget there are a million other use cases which did not see the light of the production level use cases. Now I'll move to the vault side of the world as well. There also, I would say, Gen AI is starting to show up, and I see Animesh raising eyebrows that hey, we've just talked about Gen AI and how Viva is a Hilux or a BYD, but I know Gen AI has started to show up, but only in very specific areas. Mainly, I would say validation and some bit in content. Think of summarizing SOP impacts or helping draft initial validation scripts. And I also would like to bring to light that one of the large pharma we heard, they've started using Gen AI tools to speed up their quarterly release cycles. Again, I'm a pessimist. I would look at that they are using it to speed it up. They're not using it to transform it. And in the promo max parlance, the Gen AI use cases, they're creeping into the entire content ops. I've seen use cases, or at least the demos of auto tagging, deduplication, modular reuse. Again, they're not replacing teams. I'm not saying they should replace teams, but it's only helping teams say hate metadata a little less. So now, we were also in a conversation, very recently, where I heard that Gen AI is becoming central to RFPs. So let's pump the brakes, right? So that's not what, at least I'm not seeing that. It's not a checkbox yet. And I think this also, and thank you, Durga, for bringing that up maybe 5 minutes back. So it's not a checkbox yet, but clients are noticing when a provider or any partner brings real delivery stories, not just POC slides, but real delivery stories. The early movers who can show, say, working automation in production, sure, they are getting attention, they are building credibility. And also one of the providers, they told us that they were able to renew the AMS deal on the back of some Gen AI based value or vault regression tests that they did, and they were able to shave off the effort by 60%. So yeah, these are good use cases, but maybe I'll turn towards Animesh and seek his inputs into what are you seeing when you look at providers with their Gen AI use cases or promises that are being made. Are they getting delivered, or how are you looking at the overall maturity of the Gen AI in Viva services parlance?
Right. So I think, Rohit, there is definitely maturity gap, and what we are seeing is a small cohort of provider is moving beyond POC and actually embedding Gen AI into the scale delivery. For example, take Accenture, they have their GenLight engine, which automates validation matrices and test documentation, and it's designed to slot right into quarterly vault releases and not as a side project, but as the run phase contract. Dakuma is another example. They have built a good practices compliant assistant that drafts audit report, retrieves SOPs, and connects directly into the Vault workflows. So these are no longer slideware; they are being bundled into the core services.
Just
And
like I
Animesh,
think I got intrigued by one of the comment that Rohit has made, and it's basically around how Gen AI is not being a checkbox, right? And it sort of took me back to some of the conversations around the platforms in itself. Now, within the platforms, also, if you really talk to a lot of the either service providers or pharma, your expectation is almost that they want Gen AI or agentic AI and everything, but actually that's not. In fact, in a recent study that we did, the Gen AI, agentic AI, in fact, even AI capabilities are not really top of mind when enterprises make their platform decisions. A lot the things that take precedence to AI, it's not that they're not important, they are. But what I would like to highlight is things that are taking precedence as more around how strong is the tech architecture, right? How customizable is this? Let's keep in mind that the however good a platform is, at the end of the day there are always specific needs from every enterprise, so that's where customization comes into picture. So again, I think I'm not surprised by that comment, especially because even when enterprises are trying to source platforms, while they are looking at AI, it's not the first thing that they're looking at when evaluating platforms.
I think we are towards the end. I have one last question, which I'll ask both the panelists as well as the audience. So again, people in the audience, share your responses in the comments, right? So to wrap up, again, I think for each of you, if you can talk about what's next in Viva services, right? What's your main prediction for the next few years?
I'll probably go with the cue that I just initiated right before your question, Chunky. It's not really a prediction. I think we are already experiencing it with everything that's happening in the CRM platform landscape, especially with Viva's story and Salesforce Life Sciences Cloud story as well. It's a talk track that we've been talking about for the last 2 to 3 years now, but the CRM story is totally changed, right? It's no longer expected to be a system of records. There's true expectation to be a system of engagement. So enterprises, with the new expectations of enterprises from their future CRMs, it's all about how service partners are also going to help enterprises understand their own future CRM expectations and accordingly weigh out the platform options that are out there, because clearly there's no one platform that can do everything that enterprises are aspiring or wanting. So it's that fine balance between what do you want and what do you actually need, helping that bridge that story for enterprises, and in a way giving a reality check also in a way, is what I believe is going to be the most critical thing for the next 6 to 12 months, because that's where I see a lot of the CRM decision making happen as well.
It's before any of the other themes are off the table. I'll probably go next. So given that Durga, you already taken the jazzier theme, so I'll pick up a more boring theme here. So again, one of the learnings that both me and Animesh we uncovered during the assessment is the rising demand, or how top pharma is now top, like not even top 10, top 20, but across top 50 pharma, they're prioritizing or moving towards a safety vault approach. And what we have started to notice is that safety is often the anchor point for expanding into other broader regulatory domains or modules. So if a partner say wins in safety, more often than not, they are invited to quality, regulatory, and sometimes even into medical affairs conversations, RFPs. So we see safety not just as just another growth area, but as a gateway or a foot in the door for providers, especially on the development cloud side of the thing. So as such, partners, they will now need to bring even deeper domain alignment, especially in areas such as PV compliant rollouts or AE handling or Argus interoperability. So yeah, safety vault as a theme, I think it's picking up.
Right, so I'll go next. So I think one of the more prominent theme is also operational delivery to outcome ownership shift that is already happening, and this is going to get even more prominent. So a provider, it is not just enough to say that, okay, we will configure your vault or maintain your application management services. Clients are now saying, tell me how are you helping reduce the cycle times, improve audit readiness, or accelerate go lives, and providers are being held accountable to these metrics. And we are seeing this show up in two ways. So the first is in dashboard, where partners are embedding analytics into delivery to track change requests, velocity, user adoption, and business KPI. Second is pricing. So there are now contracts where a portion of fees is also tied to tangible impact, like say cutting safety case reconciliation delays. So if there's one thing to watch out, it's this RFP question is evolving from what can you deliver to what will I gain and how will you prove it.
Okay, so those were the three predictions. I think there's a Durga. I think there's a question to one of the point that you were making, right? So the question from Vinod is, what percentage of Viva customers would you say are keen on staying with the current platform versus considering other options, including Salesforce Life Sciences Cloud? I think we were discussing that overall, right? So not just talking about existing Viva customers, but eh, Dhruva, correct me if I'm wrong. We think 55 to 60% with Viva and 35 to 40% with Salesforce, and the remaining with the rest. Is
Yeah.
that accurate? Okay.
That's where we are at. I mean, I think it's a level playing field in a way. We've been saying that out quite, quite in a lot of our conversations. It's not going to be the story that it was 4 to 5 years ago. So definitely a level playing field. And not just, I think, while Salesforce is also one of the other bigger players, we've also talked a lot about the niche players, and while I think that's also one other category of cohort that's trying to bag a good pie of that overall market share.
Fantastic. And just, I think, to share more context, right? So, since I think there was a question on Viva, Salesforce, and percentage of customers. So, again, I think if you think about before the Viva Salesforce split, Viva had about like 85% of the market, IQVIA had 10%, and the 5% with the rest. I think when the split was just announced, even our initial expectations were that Viva would end up retaining maybe 70-75% market share. But I think since then, what the numbers that Durga and I mentioned, right? Clearly, there has been a shift. Clearly there are enterprises who are looking at Salesforce Life Sciences Cloud. So I think it's a more level playing field compared to what we thought when the split was announced.
Right.
I think those were all the questions. So I think that's it from us. So thanks everyone for tuning in. If you have any questions or if you would like to hear more from us, feel free to reach out. Thanks everyone. Take care.
Thank you all. Bye.